Hello and welcome. In this new series, we are going to discuss Quranic verses that are mostly overlooked, yet they reveal how the standard Islamic narrative was fabricated. Today, let's talk about halal food. 4 verses in the Quran address food restrictions. 3 of those verses show there is a problem with the narrative, and the 4th one gives the game away entirely. We'll cover the narrative problems first, and we'll conclude with the verse that stands out the most and exposes the issue. In the Bible, Leviticus forbids many foods, and it begins with, "The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, Say to the Israelites, of the animals that live on land, these are the ones you may eat," and so on. It clearly shows that God is forbidding certain foods. However, the Quran isn't written in that manner. Surah 16, verse 115 addresses the listeners, stating that God has forbidden some foods for the audience. But that begs the question, when did God forbid them? Where is the verse where God says, "I hereby forbid so and so to you"? Where is the actual revelation? Surah 6, verse 145 is similar to the previous one. The writer addresses the audience, explaining what was revealed as forbidden. But where is that revelation? Where exactly do we see God forbidding food? Instead, we're reading words from a writer who indicates to the audience that some foods were forbidden. Surah 2, verse 173 follows a similar format. The writer tells the audience what foods God forbade, but the revelation itself isn't there at all. Okay, let's examine the implications of this. The verses are clearly not written as though they are a revelation from God. I mean, look at this. Indeed, he has only forbidden for you blah blah blah. Is that God speaking and addressing himself in the third person? If we try to fix it and say that it is in fact God speaking, then God said something like, "Indeed, he, God, I, the person speaking, has only forbidden for you certain stuff." Is it a poetic form? God forbidding food at that point in time and saying that he has forbidden means actually that he is forbidding things at that very specific point in time. It doesn't make any sense. Also, if that were the case, these verses would be unnecessary. Say the revelation forbidding food happened in Mecca. Then, when traveling around, Mohammed and the companions would simply recite the previously revealed verse. Instead, it's repeated again, as though God revealed the same information 3 times, presumably to 3 distinct audiences? This doesn't make any sense. They would simply recite the same verse again. So, let's move to the last verse. Surah 5, verse 3 is by far the longest of all of these. In fact, is the one with the greatest amount of detail and also with the biggest problem. Notice how it is rendered in some translations. I generally use Hilali Khan, Sahih International, and Yusuf as I think they're quite popular. Notice how each of them is translated in the present tense. See? This is clearly the verse where forbidding food actually happened, with the 3 verses we discussed earlier being some weird reminder of this one verse. Except that's not the case at all. Saint Murad translates this verse in the past tense. I've checked with AI, and it confirmed that's correct. The verbal sentence is clearly in the past tense. This isn't God forbidding food for new converts, ex-pagans or whoever. This verse addresses people who are familiar with these restrictions already. It was forbidden to you, aka the audience, in the past tense. If this was meant to be God, once again, where's the revelation in the Quran in the present tense? Why don't we have a verse from God forbidding these things? This verse is explaining to the audience something they already knew. It tells them what was forbidden for them. Therefore, the audience would have been Jewish people who were aware of their food restrictions already, or perhaps Christians, as they would have understood that was forbidden to you referred to the Old Covenant, even though they were under a new one. They would have connected those dots. Therefore, the Quran never contained a verse that made food haram, so they invented one. In the translations, as shown, they should have translated this verse in the past tense, as it appears in the Arabic. However, by changing the tense from past to present, lo and behold, the missing revelation meant to make food haram is fabricated. Just like that. These verses had nothing to do with Islam, as the religion is a much later fabrication. The revelation of forbidding certain foods is not in the Quran, because it is in Leviticus. The preachers who wrote the Quran were merely reiterating what the audience already knew. So, halal food was never in the Quran. They tried to fix it during the creation of the standard Islamic narrative, but the Quran paints a very different picture. These verses are nothing but references to the restrictions in Leviticus, much later reinterpreted to fabricate a new narrative and to give it legitimacy. We will discuss more mistranslations and misinterpretations of Quranic verses in future videos. Stay tuned for those and see you then.